Hey guys, Rob here at 3D Printscape. I want to show you how to set up your Cura profile to work with your Indoor 3. I've got an Indoor 3 Pro here, so that's what we're going to focus on. Before we get started on that, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe, and let's jump over to the computer. Alright, now that we're at the computer, let's go ahead and set up our profiles in Cura. First thing we're going to want to do is download Cura, so let's go ahead and open a browser and do that. Alright, just go ahead and search for Cura download. Let that autofill. And go to your first one here. And depending upon what OS you're using, it will change what it's recommending. I'm just using Windows, so just go ahead and download for free. I would not recommend going with the beta version. Go with the latest stable, which in this case is 4.5. So go ahead and download that. Alright, now that that's downloaded, we'll go ahead and launch the installer. Alright, we had to give it admin rights just in case you missed that. I guess I opened it twice, so let's close out on one of these. Sorry about that. Alright, so just walk through the installer here. Accept the license agreement, choose your install location. Just leave it default unless you have a reason to change it. Alright. And while that's installing, make sure you guys smash that like button and subscribe. Once this is actually installed, what we're going to do is we're going to add our printer in there, go through some of the settings, that I typically use, talk about supports briefly, and then go into layers. Alright, looks like that install is done. So the goal of this is going to be to have more of a baseline profile. Printers can be different based on your settings, how you have it tweaked, the filament you're using. So what I'm trying to provide here is a good starting point, and you might have to make adjustments from there. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. Agree to the license that everybody obviously reads. Next. Alright, next. Now I don't have a network printer, so I'm going to add a non-network printer. This is what it's going to look like if you're going through the install the first time. I uninstalled Cura so that I can walk through this as a fresh install. Alright, so we have the Indoor 3 Pro, so let's go ahead and find that. It's going to be under... It's going to be here. And then we're going to want to choose the Indoor 3. Now, as far as your slicer settings, there's really no difference in the base profile between the Indoor 3 and the Indoor 3 Pro. So whichever one you're using, it doesn't matter. Just select Indoor 3. There will be some adjustments that you'll want to make in the profile itself, but I'm going to tune this towards the Indoor 3 Pro. All right, so next. All right, so just review your settings here. Make sure everything makes sense. You got your X and Y axis, your Z height. Make sure that the heated bed is checked and the origin at center is not checked. Our auto home goes to the front left, so if you tried to use the origin at center, it will be printing the actual object based on if it was at the center, so it'd be towards the back right, I believe. Might be wrong on that, but it will be in a different spot on the bed. Alright, and then I never mess with these G-code settings here, so just go ahead and leave those as they are. Alright, and go ahead and hit next. And if you have a Ultimaker account, you can sign in. For this example, I'm not going to. I'm just going to hit finish. Alright, so now we've got our base profile in here. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the default settings. One thing I like to do is I go here, I go to custom, just to get more visibility into all the settings, and then I go to this hamburger menu here and then go to advanced. I like to adjust some of the miscellaneous settings, so it just makes it easier because I can see everything. Alright, so starting at the top with your profile or your quality, this is going to be your layer height. Most prints are going to be at 0.2 millimeters. You could, if you're looking for higher quality, you could reduce it down to 0.16 or even 0.12. Just make sure that whatever you're choosing, or if you're modifying this, that it's divisible by your nozzle size. So right now we're using a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, so go into your standard quality 5 times or 4 times for dynamic, or 3 times for super, as you can see. Alright, so go ahead and keep that on standard. We'll go ahead and walk through each one of these. Alright, so layer height is one that I typically don't change here. I'll keep this based on what it shows for the actual profile, because it's directly linked to the profile. So if we switch to super, it's going to change your height again. Alright, so line width I'm not changing, top and bottom line width I'm not changing, so really I'd leave this section as it is. Jumping down into shell, if you're wanting a really thick wall, you can adjust that here. The wall thickness is going to be a multiple of your nozzle. So again, we've got a 0.4 millimeter. So if we have 3 walls or 3 lines, you're going to have 1.2. I'm going to go ahead and actually I'm going to leave that at 3. I go back and forth between 2 and 3, but we'll leave it at 3 here. It's for most things I'm printing, it makes the most sense anyway. Alright, for your top layers, if you like a really thick top layer, you can adjust this. I typically will leave these at 4 for both of them. Sometimes I will increase the bottom to 5. It's just depending upon what I'm printing, but most of the time you're going to be good with 4 on both of these. You could probably get away with 3 too. It will save a little bit of time on the print itself as well. Alright, and I will leave that at that for your shell. For infill, it depends on what you're printing and what the requirements of the print are. If you're just printing some sort of model or mini figure, I would go with 10 or 20%. I'll just drop this to 10% for now. Then it will adjust all of these accordingly. For your infill pattern, I've been doing gyroid a lot. It's a really strong infill and it looks pretty cool as it's being printed. If you want to see what all of the infills look like, you can check out my video. I'll link it below, but I printed out all of these on a coaster and I removed the top layer so you can actually see what all the infills look like. Alright, and that's going to be everything for our shell. Alright, so next is going to be material. This is going to be your actual printing temperature of both the hot end and of the build plate. PLA can vary vastly based on the brand, so starting at about 200 is a good starting point. If you want to get a very specific one for the filament that you're using most often, you're probably going to want to print a temperature tower. I'll be creating a video on that in the next couple weeks. But like I said, leave this at 200 as a starting point, and then I'll bump this up to 65 for your build plate temperature. And that just has worked better for me overall. And again, this is for PLA. If you're printing with ABS, it's going to change entirely. But we're not going to go with that right now. Alright, so now for your speed. This printer does pretty good at 50 millimeter a second. You might want to drop it down to 40 if you start to see any issues, but I'm just going to leave this at 50 for now. Alright, our next section is going to be travel. There are a couple things I like to change in here. Combing mode I will set to all, and then make sure avoid printed parts when traveling is enabled. What this does is it'll help with scarring. If you have a flat surface that is exposed, if you don't have it set this way, you're going to get lines that go across almost like a scratch or a scar. So this will help with that. Alright, next we'll go to cooling. The indoor 3 does have a fan, so you want to make sure that you are enabling it and that you set the max fan speed to 100%. But I would leave all these settings as they are. Alright, next we'll go down to support. Unless you're printing something that needs support, go ahead and leave it disabled. And if you're printing something that does need support, there are a couple options, such as your infill pattern, the placement, whether it just be touching build plate or everywhere. With the standard supports, I have issues getting it off of the print without causing damage. So I've been playing around with the new support type. It's under experimental, but it's called tree support. I'll show you where that's at. I would recommend just playing around with it, see how it works, but it's been easier to actually get the support off. It's not touching the entire actual model everywhere, and it's hollow, so it reduces the print time. So let me go ahead and uncheck that. Now let's go down to build plate adhesion. I will pretty much always do skirt. I think I've only played with raft once or twice, and I've never done brim. What a skirt does is just creates a single line, or in this case 3 lines around the outside of the object itself. That helps purge the nozzle head and get any imperfections out of there, and it just makes it so that when it actually starts the print, you're at an even, consistent layer. Alright, dual extrusion. I only have, or this printer only has the one extruder, so that's not too important here. Alright, special modes. Just make sure that all at once is selected. That's the only thing you have to worry about here. Alright, then going down to experimental. I've been playing around with use adaptive layers, so I'll make sure that that is checked. And then also, this is where you would be able to see the tree support as well. I don't have that enabled, but if you just go up here and type tree, that'll come up, and then you can see all the default settings. If I am using tree support, it'll just be with the default settings, so I don't change any of that. So let me go ahead and just disable that. Alright, and then let's go ahead and drop an object in here. It's just a waving Groot, just so we can show you the slice time. Alright, so if we go ahead and go to slice, this does take a little bit longer because it's a taller object. Alright, and then while that's slicing, like I said, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. It'll help us out. Now the slicing time varies based on the object itself. Obviously, more complex objects will take longer to slice, but it also depends on your computer as well. This is a decent computer I'm running on, so it should be quick, but for some of these larger objects I have seen it take a while, but typically no more than a minute. Alright, so it looks like that's almost done. So this will take about 17 hours to print and use 83 grams of filament, which is not awful. One thing I did want to show you since we're here, if you have an object that is too large, you can always scale it. So let's just say if we made this bigger than the build plate itself, so it would look like this. As you can see, in this case, the head would be sticking out, and so would the part of the fingers. So you would just go to our scale and then set a percentage. So if you're this, let's just say this was 100%, and you wanted to make it smaller, you can drop it down to 75%. But we'll just go back to 100% on this, just to use as an example. When you change that, though, you will have to reslice. So let me go ahead and do that. And while I'm going over that, I should have talked about this as I did it, but when I made the group figure larger, as you saw, it kind of went underneath the build plate, and sometimes if you're making it smaller, it'll go above the build plate and leave a gap. The easiest way to fix that is to go to edit and reset model position. So that just put it back where it was. There's also a plugin that I would recommend installing as well. So let's go to Marketplace really quick while that's slicing. Sorry, computer's thinking. It's this settings guide. So go ahead and click on it and go to install. What that does is it's a guide that you can open up, and it will basically outline all of the settings that are there. I'll restart Cura in a minute to show you what it looks like, because you do have to restart when you install any plugins. If you're going to be installing more than one plugin, just go ahead and close out of this and then just install all of them that you need, and then go ahead and restart. Alright, so let's just go over to preview. I'll kind of show you what this looks like now. Alright, so let's go ahead and zoom in and rotate up so we can kind of see the layers here. This has 962 layers. As you can see, the hand touches here, and then the feet do as well, and as you're going up, it starts to create that gyroid, which is a very strong infill pattern. Even at 10%, this thing is going to be pretty solid. You're starting to get some bridging issues here, so I would be enabling support if I was printing this. Yeah, you're really going to want to support this arm, really. But I'm just going through, looking to make sure nothing stands out. There's a Baby Yoda figure where you'll see the fingers on one of the layer. They're completely separated from the actual print, as an example. So that would just be a stringy mess if you don't have supports. So I'm just looking for things like that, which in this print, it looks okay. So I would go ahead and save it and send it over to the printer and print it. Alright, so let's go ahead and restart Cura so I can show you that plugin. Alright, Cura is back up. Now, if you'd like, I can export all of the settings and either put them in a file linked in the comment below, or just put the settings in the comments below. Just let me know. And if you have any settings that you recommend or you think would be a good addition to what we've gone over, please leave a comment as well. Alright, so let's go to extensions, our settings guide, and select that. So here, let's go to shell, for example, and the wall. It goes into details of what this actually does with diagrams, which is really nice. Or going down to infill, let's say you wanted to look at the different infill patterns. You can see here what the grid does, lines, your triangles, trihex, etc., all of your cubics, your octets, and then it kind of gives a nice description of what all of them are. So this is a really good reference if you're ever questioning any of the settings. I would always go back and look here. I did want to show you one thing on some of the experimental things. Let's say tree support as an example. They added it in 4.5, but in one of the previous versions it wasn't here. So it would just be blank. It pretty much means that it's too new and they don't have documentation. You'll see that for some of the actual brand new settings that they're playing around with. It looks like they've gotten better in 4.5. But I'm sure that you will end up seeing some of them that don't have the references. But yeah, this is a great resource. I would recommend spending some time in here just going through all of the settings just to familiarize yourself with what they are and what they're for. Alright guys, so there you have it. You should now have a profile that's going to work with your Ender 3 Pro. Make sure you leave a comment below if you have any other recommendations around tweaking that profile. Just help us all out. But that's what I've been currently running with. Make sure you guys smash that like button and subscribe. It'll really help us out. And thank you. See you next time.